Chapter 1. Heavy rain. People took refuge in the umbrellas of bars and shops, and on the walls and eaves of houses and entrances to the metro. And all that was left in the Comédie Française square was water flowing from the gutters, and cars waving like a breeze. One human being remained steadfast in this sight, and proceeded slowly, not busy. With something, his wide eyes contemplate the square's fountain, which is full of water, and his mouth with wide lips picks something like a date, and spits out something like a pit, and his right hand is like a faithful messenger, from his pocket to his mouth, bringing him supplies without interruption. This human being is a skinny boy, black-clothed, with a hat on his head. Wide black frame, with a sunken hole at its top, like a soup bowl, it was filled with rain-water. The boy finished contemplating the fountain, so he left it to another side of the square, where there stands a statue of the poet, de Musset, seeking inspiration from the bride of poetry. The boy stood looking at it, and on its base was engraved, "Nothing makes us great except great pain." Then he looked at the poet's face and saw raindrops falling from his eyes like tears, so his heart moved, and his mouth was silent. Then he whispered, repeating as if addressing himself, "Nothing makes us great except great pain." Yes? Images from a distant past passed through the boy's head. Then he whispered, "Even here they know this." He sank into thought, and his hat sank into the water, until it overflowed and ran down his face, and then a voice behind his back shouted to him, "I bet, for 100 francs, that no one will stand like this in front of this statue except you." The boy turned around quickly, "André. Before all words, save me and yourself from this rain. This is not the time to look at statues. This is the time. Contemplate, André. These tears are in the poet's eyes. If this poet were not made of marble, he would have spent the hour fleeing, he and his bride, to the nearest coffee shop, and leaving you alone, in the middle of these waters." The Frenchman did not wait for an answer from his friend, but rather pulled him to the umbrella of the nearby Regent's coffee shop, then looked at his face and found his mouth moving. "Wow. What's in your mouth?" The boy did not answer, and he spewed a pit from his mouth, which fell into the running water and into the dates, and André shouted at him, "Are you eating dates?" "Yes, and in the streets of Paris." "Oh, bird coming from the east. In Egypt we call it mujwa, this type of date." I now imagine myself in the mosque square in the Sayyida Zainab neighborhood. And I imagine this fountain, that path, with its copper-barred windows. Enough imagination. Come on, the rain has stopped. To where? André did not answer, and began looking at the boy's clothes and contemplating him. From his black hat, his black coat, his black tie, to his black shoes, then he said, "Very great." "What is so great?" "You are now best suited to go." "To my beautiful girl?" "Rather, to the cemeteries. Come with me, to hold the funeral of Madame Charles's daughter's husband. You need a complete blacksmith's kit. It's as if I'm always ready for such requests. It gives me great pleasure to accompany someone like you on this short excursion." "The picnic?" the boy said while looking at his friend suspiciously. But his companion ignored the look, and he pulled him by his hand. He said, "Let us perform this duty together." "Towards whom?" "Towards the late husband of Madame Charles's daughter." "Who is Madame Charles first?" "She is the mother of one of my colleagues at the factory." "What is my fault?" "It's your fault that you are my friend." "Bear what I bear. Nothing burdens me like walking in silence, behind the hearses. We'll talk, at least together, in our affairs, and in your affairs. I promise you a sincere promise, to talk all the time, about your beautiful nose, what you say is, in your opinion, other than the ideal of a beautiful nose, and turn over all the images and situations in your head, which I had imagined for beauty." "Yes, yes. I considered beauty." The boy started talking excitedly, and he did not notice that André was leading him by the arm. He took him to a metro station and bought him a second-class ticket. And he put him on a train that took them through the depths of the earth, passing Mohsen's tongue with that delicious conversation. And André smiled at the end of it maliciously. The smile of someone who says to himself, "I now have the key to driving him." So I would wave it to him and he would follow me submissively, without realizing it, to the ends of the earth. The bells of Saint-Germain Church rang to celebrate the reception of the body. The funeral had not yet arrived. There was no one at the door of the church except Mohsen. Andre left him at the door and went to buy an umbrella. They protect themselves from the rain while walking on the road from the church to the cemetery. Andre slowed down to his friend. The beginnings of the funeral appeared. The bells rang intensified, then the church door opened wide. The hearse approached, carrying the coffin lying under the bouquets of flowers, and the mourners behind it under their umbrellas. The carriage stopped, and the coffin was carried into the church, and the crowds of mourners passed by Mohsen, in his full black clothes, and they bowed to him, thinking that he was one of the deceased's closest relatives. Here the boy realized the embarrassment of his situation, so he hurried and infiltrated the group of those entering, before the eyes of the deceased's real family fell on him, and people bowed down to him and formed suspicions about him. Mohsen entered the church, and he had never entered a church, nor attended the prayer of a dead Christian, nor seen the ceremonies taking place there, nor the rituals that were followed. He felt a sense of awe, and it seemed to him that by crossing the threshold he had left the earth and ascended to another atmosphere, with its own fragrance and light. Here too is the eye of reverence and the eye of feeling, which shook itself whenever he entered the Sayyida Zainab Mosque in Cairo. Here too is the eye of stillness, the eye of darkness in the corners, and the eye of tiny light wandering like spirits in the atmosphere of the place. The house of God is the house of God in every place and at all times. The coffin was placed in the chest, candles were lit around it, and the voices of the monks began to grow louder, chanting prayers to the tunes of the organ. Then the people advanced in a long line towards the coffin, passing it, one after the other, dousing it with holy water from a silver bottle, and Mohsen walked in the line. Stunned, afraid to make a sound on the church floor. He paid attention a little, and saw the bottle in the hands of those in front of him in the row, with which one made the sign of the cross, and he sprinkled the dead person with it, then handed it in silence to those behind him, and the boy watched this act repeated more than 50 times, and he counted 1,000 accounts for his shift. He was astonished by awe, and all he noticed was the bottle being handed to him by someone in front of him. He took it with a trembling hand and waved it toward the coffin, drawing a sign in the air. He did not know who was so confused, whether it indicated a cross or a crescent. Then he emptied the coffin in such a way that he feared that it had spilled too much and wet the lid, but he finished his task anyway, so he breathed a sigh of relief, and extended his hand with the bottle to hand it over to the next one, but he did not find anyone behind him. He was the last in line. What a disaster! What to do? He was hot and confused with this bottle in his hand, not knowing what to do with it, and the people were busy comforting the family of the dead person standing at the exit door, and cold sweat dripped from his forehead. He was holding something sacred in his hand. So how could he act on his own, in something owned by God inside? House of God. It is a great responsibility. One of the priests noticed him in this situation, so he rushed to him and carried the burden from him. So the boy left. It is as if he is saying in naivety, how strong are the strength of those men who bear all these consequences in managing the property of heaven. Mohsen quickly joined the class. To console the family of the dead, he barely approached them in his black clothes, until they stared at him. It is as if they are remembering or wondering about this close friend, who came to share their affliction with them in full mourning clothes, the likes of which were not worn by some of the dead's relatives or relatives. And they are tired of remembering. Mohsen understood what was on their minds. He quickly uttered a few unintelligible words. He went outside, and found Andre standing under a new umbrella, among the rest of the mourners waiting for the coffin to emerge. The Frenchman saw his friend and immediately stared at him. "Why are you so yellow-faced?" Mohsen did not answer other than saying, "Go and bury your colleague. As for me, I am waiting for you in Dom Coffee." He quickly disappeared, before giving Andre time to speak. Mohsen and his friend, Andre, sat in the Dome Cafe in the Montparnasse district, which is the meeting place for people of art, photographers, sculptors, and poets. Because of this, it became famous and popular. That year, the price of the French franc fell, bringing many tourists to Paris, most of them the Americans spread like flies everywhere. Mohsen asked for a cup of orange juice, which he sipped slowly through the hollow straw. The weather that afternoon was stifling and humid. Mohsen looked at the red color of the drink for a moment, then suddenly his body trembled. He remembered a vague dream he had last night. It might have been a nightmare. No. It wasn't exactly a nightmare, because he didn't see anything disturbing in it, or anything exaggerated. Its events were normal, logical. Mohsen saw himself accused of a murder, and saw his victim as a man whose name and personality he did not know. What weapon did he use in his crime? And for what reason was all this? He doesn't know anything. All he knows is that he was accused, and that his hands were stained with blood, and shackled. Then he saw himself waking up from his sleep screaming, "I am innocent. I am innocent." It was still night. He got up and lit up the place to see his hands. Why was this dream? Is he really a killer? So what? Didn't he perform the obligatory prayer before going to sleep? The sight of blood was something unbearable to him. He had never forgotten some days of the revolution, the 1919 revolution. He had not yet completed his 20th year. His advisor father wanted him to become a lawyer, and he saw that his desire was directed towards art and literature. Therefore, his mission during the revolution was to compose patriotic songs that he himself composed, and which his colleagues, the youth of Cairo, sang enthusiastically behind prison bars, while he carried no weapon other than the weapon of enthusiasm. In the midst of the crowd he carried nothing but a burning heart, and enthusiastic patriotic songs. One day he saw a scene from a close-up that left its mark for a lifetime. He saw a young British soldier standing alone, and the rebels spotted him. They surrounded him and one of them hit him with an iron rod on the head, causing him to gasp and fall to death. Blood was filling his face, and his brains were scattered everywhere. The boy Mohsen fainted, became dizzy, and almost fainted. While the British soldiers appeared armed with machine guns, the rebels dispersed into the dark alleys, and Mohsen remained with his back to the wall, staring at what he saw. It was a coincidence that the soldiers did not notice him, and when he woke up, he flew quickly, stepping over the bodies of the dead in deserted neighborhoods. The sight of the young soldier covered in his blood did not leave his imagination. He forgot that he was his enemy, the enemy of his country. He no longer remembered anything except that sad sight, that terrible death. Then Mohsen shook off his dreams and woke up to André's laughing voice. André asked for a glass of Bruno, took a sip from it, then turned to his friend and said, "Do you know where they buried Madame Charles's daughter's husband?" "I don't want to know where they buried him." "Why?" Mohsen was fed up. "And then?" "Tell me, for the sake of your Lord, when will you free me from this so-called husband of Madame Charles' daughter? Isn't it enough for you that I prayed for his soul in the church and poured him out of the holy bottle?" "Yes. I will never forgive you for this negligence on your part. You knew that I was inside this sacred sanctuary and you did not tell me until I prepared myself." André smiled and said, "O Eastern bird. Preparing yourself to enter the church. What is the meaning of this? We enter it as we enter a cafe. What is the difference? There is a public place, and here is a public place. There is the organ, and here is the orchestra." Mohsen did not turn to him and whispered as if addressing himself. "There is even heaven. It is not easy for the soul to ascend at every moment, it is an effort." The Frenchman did not seem to understand Mohsen, and did not bother to ask him. He raised his cup and took another swig, then pointed with both corners of his eyes to a beautiful American woman, sitting with her family close to them, and she did not stop looking at the artists around her. Her eyes finally fell on Mohsen, in his black clothes, so she winked at those with her and whispered to them. With words. Mohsen noticed her looks and said to André in a low voice, "Why are they looking at me like that? They think you are among the people of art, with this hat and these clothes. They look at me like a person looks at a strange bird. Have they never seen an artist? It seems to me, André, that these Americans are people created from reinforced concrete. They have no soul, no taste, and no past. If you opened a chest of one of them, you would find $1 in the place of the heart. They come to this ancient world, thinking that with gold they can buy themselves a taste and a past for their country." André did not appear to have listened to all of his friend's words. His eyes followed the American. He said, "Is this your Lord made of reinforced concrete? Don't look at her like that, otherwise, you will say to your wife, Germaine." The Frenchman shrugged his shoulders and continued to show his admiration. He looked at those blue eyes as if they were two lakes of paradise in their blue color. No. Paradise lakes are turquoise. Oh, intrigued one. You only see the eyes of your beautiful girl whose name you do not know. Mohsen looked into space, smiling as his imagination drifted, then said, I know her voice. And this is not a little. Last night at the opera. Were you at the opera? Rest assured. I heard her voice. I mean a voice like hers. Every beautiful voice is hers. I heard him singing, my heart opens to your voice, just as flowers open to the kisses of the morning.